All right, good afternoon, guys. I hope you're having a great start to your week. I'm just here to give you your the Sunday school video for this week. We're on Unit 9, Session 2. Unit 9, Session 2. And this is our second week in the book of Judges, but it's also going to be our last week in the book of Judges. We'll move on to the book of Ruth next week. Um, this week we talked about this cycle that the book of Judges follows um, of Israel's sin, their judgment. God raises up a leader, and then he restores the people. But this week, we're going to look at a particular story about a particular judge. He's probably the most famous in the book of Judges. His name is Samson. And so we're going to look at the story of Samson, but I want us to look at it through the lens of what this story teaches us about leaders, what it teaches us about how do we respond when leaders fail us, right? Because a big part of stories of Samson's story is the failure of himself, right? He didn't hold faithful, right? The whole time he messed up, but God still used him. So we're going to talk about that. Your scripture this week, I think it's a little overwhelming with the amount that it gives. I did take a little bit off of it. Um, of course, you feel free to use all that, but I thought this might help you a little bit. And I did change the points a little bit too because I did feel like it focused a little too much in one direction. So again, I don't like to change those. Much more work on my part, but at the same time, I feel like as we're talking about this, I think this is a great opportunity here to talk about what does it mean when Christian leaders fail us, right? Because we know it's all been a thing. So first point I have, and we're going to look through again the lens of Israel here, and then we'll relate it to our context today. But first, you see that God gifted Israel with a leader. God gifted Israel with a leader. In Judges 13, we see the promise that God was going to raise up a son, and he would deliver the people from the Philistines that had conquered them. And so, in the same way, guys, God has gifted us with so many incredible leaders, so many people that do these amazing things for God. Um, and I'm not just talking about pastors and missionaries and whatnot. Of course, we're led at our church by an incredible leader in Pastor Steve. But just think about leaders in the workplace, leaders in the home, right? Leaders that don't necessarily wear a badge of saying, "Hey, I'm a minister of the gospel," but they're still doing ministry every day. God has given us some incredible people to look up to. And believe it or not, you guys are some of those incredible people that your students look up to. And so never feel like they're not watching because they are, um, for the better or for the worse. And so God has gifted us with leaders. Secondly, in Judges 16, you see that Samson did what was right in his own eyes. So if there's a theme verse for or a theme phrase for the book of Judges, it is when man does what is right in his own eyes. And that's what happened throughout the whole book. And Samson was supposed to be the man that delivered them from this consequence that they've created because they had done what was right in their own eyes. And then guess what he does? He goes and he does what is right in his own eyes. And here's the truth, guys. Christian leaders, whether it's a pastor, a family member, a teacher, whatever it may be, we're all guilty of doing what's right in our own eyes. We all are. It's our human instinct. It's our that selfish nature that we're born with. And so as we look at this story, I think that an important part of it is understanding that Samson did this, but also leaders today we're just as guilty of this kind of thing. And so that's in Judges 16 is when you see his failure with Delilah, which is ultimately why his strength is taken away. And then finally, we get to the third point, and that's that God redeems and still works through broken vessels. God redeems and still works through broken vessels. If you look at the end of chapter 16, verses 21 through 30, you see that Samson has an opportunity to still deliver God's people here at the very end. And he asks God to restore his strength that he had lost because he cut his hair. And God did. He allowed Samson to still be used, even though Samson had failed. And he didn't just fail God, he failed all the people as well. And so if we look at that through the lens of today and what we make of Christian leaders, not a single one of those Christian leaders are perfect. And they would be the first ones to tell you that. Um, and unfortunately, some make greater mistakes than others, but God is still working through them, still working through people. Now, of course, there's things that that Christian leaders have done that they kind of they kind of lose the right to be able to minister, and that's kind of a different subject. But the point is this: is that every single leader that we can look up to, you guys included, your leaders to our students, we all make mistakes, we all struggle, we all fall short. But I think the important thing is, what do we do with that? Do we just sit in it, or do we allow God to use it? And because He wants to redeem it all, He wants to work. He's working everything for good, even the things that look negative and look bad. He's working them all for good. So I hope this is kind of a unique perspective for you, a way to kind of look at this in a fresh light of kind of how we look at the story of Samson and the story of Israel in this day, but also how we relate that to our day and our culture. Hope you guys have a great week, and we'll see you.